So, welcome everybody to our last but not least, hopefully, seminar series on critical mental health. And it's my name is Małgorzata Reiter, and I work at the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology of the Polish Academy of Sciences. And it's my great pleasure to invite and to welcome Professor Claudia Lang, who is an associate professor at the Institute of Ethnology at the University of Leipzig, a research associate at the Max Planck Institute of Anthropology in Halle, Germany, and currently a visiting scholar and lecturer in the Department of Anthropology at Tufts University in Boston. I hope that I got the last part right. And
yeah.
Yeah, and so
just looking out to the beautiful campus and the snowflakes. So it's really...
yeah, let's imagine that beautiful campus and snowflakes. Okay, and Professor Lang has conducted a long-term research in South Asia, and her research focuses on mental health and care in India, global health, depression, Ayurveda, science and technology in light industrial India. And she has published a book titled Depression in Kerala, Ayurveda and Mental Health Care in the 21st Century, that was published with Routledge in 2018, and is a co-editor of two books, one Global Health for All, Knowledge, Politics and Practices with Rutgers, that was recently published, and the Movement for Global Mental Health, Critical Views from South and Southeast Asia, that was published with Amsterdam University Press also recently. So Claudia, the floor is yours, and just one house rule, we'll have the question and answers session after the talk.
Okay, thank you very much, Gozia, for this invitation and this generous introduction. Here's my title, Machine Learning to Care, Imagining, Encoding, and Experiencing Automated Therapy. The world is on fire, Wysa's founder, IIT-trained engineer Joe Agarwal said to me in 2019, a few months before the pandemic. We sit in a relaxed, open-plan office in a middle-class neighborhood in the IT metropole Bengaluru in South India. Joe has invited me to her startup Wysa to talk about their AI-based mental health app with the same name. I was curious about how digital technology could possibly transform the way people think about and intervene in mental and emotional distress. Since 2019, I've continued to meet Joe and Wysa's psychologists, AI designers, content designers, and product leads in Bangalore and now in Boston, where they shifted their main office in 2022. I talked to team members to learn about digital mental health care as it was designed, operated, and used. I was interested in humans behind the bot, their ideas about care and well-being, their future-oriented imaginaries, and their work in programming a bot to care for emotional distress. So this is not working now. Oh. Wysa is a chatbot in the figure of a gender-neutral penguin. It is designed to be what its designers call a digital coach, an AI friend, or a happiness buddy who checks in daily, an emotional resilience tool built into your smartphone. It listens, it asks questions, and provides support. Designed and developed by software engineers and therapists, and using natural language processing and interpreting speech patterns, it aims to help users reduce their distress, get in touch with their emotions and thought patterns, deal with distressing situations, and develop resilience. So far, it operates mainly in English, with a Spanish test version already on the market and a Hindi version soon to be released. A well-being tool that is anonymous, available around the clock, and fits in your pocket, the app relocates the therapeutic encounter and the therapeutic relationship into a digital encounter with a machine and bridges temporal and spatial obstacles. It provides chat with a chatbot, self-help exercises in mindfulness, managing anxiety and sleeping problems, or developing coping and problem-solving skills, and for a fee of around $80 per month, chats with one of Wysa's human psychologists. According to Smriti Joshi, addresses what she called the missing middle of mental health. People who need more than mindfulness exercises, but not yet a human therapist, psychiatrist, or medication. As of December 2023, Wysa has over 3 million downloads on Google Play with a rating of, I don't know who of you are familiar with these numbers, with a rating of 4.8 out of 5. And according to its websites, has helped over 4 million users in 65 countries. While modest as a small-scale, pragmatic, and cost-effective technological fix, Wysa's designers' scalar aspirations and ambitions are anything but small. Wysa collaborates with insurance companies, private hospitals, healthcare systems in countries as the UK or Singapore, and with venture capital companies based in the US and India. Providing therapeutic work outside the clinic, it not only reaches out to many more people than could be reached by conventional therapy, it also expands and redefines Psy expertise by including conversational designers, software engineers, and product managers, along with psychologists, but excluding psychiatrists. As Wysa's designers aim to build radically new mental health futures through designing automated care, they encode their situated assumptions about the worlds in which this app is to be put to use into algorithms, even while crafting these worlds. Wysa inhabits a crowded digital mental health marketplace that is characterized by techno-utopian aspirations to transform or even reinvent therapy through digitization, artificial intelligence, and platformization. Like physical health apps, mental health and well-being apps provide technologies and techniques for self-work, diagnosis, and management of everyday crises. These apps respond to the hopes and hypes disseminated by interventionists in global health who celebrate mental health apps such as Wysa as scalable and low-cost solution to the presumed mental health treatment gap. The technologies are characterized as disruptive and revolutionizing mental health care, as the new frontier in the battle of mental illness, supplementing or even replacing human therapists, and thereby leapfrogging infrastructural constraints. Proponents of digital mental health celebrate coverage where there's been a treatment gap, agency where there's been stigma, and self-care where there has been neglect. A techno-optimism of caring for the well-being at the individual and even the population level becomes obvious in designers dreaming about the digital future where mental health care is freed from its dependency on conventional Psy experts and presumably becomes cheaper and more widely available. It reveals visions of accelerated digital and future-oriented world building, making mental health and well-being both a social and an economic good in the light of mounting social and financial costs of mental disabilities. Seen from the perspective of their proponents, the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic has been an important opportunity for digital mental health reform and development. In 2021, Chedali, one of Wysa's psychologists, noted the rise of demand spurred by the pandemic. I quote her, the entire digital mental health market, she said, has just exploded in 2020. End of quote. Reflecting this rise in demand, the startups team has expanded tenfold during the pandemic and after, and attracted a flurry of new investments. So as you can see here, Indian media too celebrate therapy chatbots. They say AI-powered therapy bots at workplace for employees during COVID pandemic, also that fired Indian technology workers turned to chatbots for counseling, and so on and so on. In contrast to this techno-optimism, critics argue that digital technologies cannot solve broader problems of inequity, structural violence, and the stresses of contemporary life. The emphasis on technical solutions may disguise the underlying social, political, and economic, as well as moral, global, and more local contexts through which mental health problems emerge. Critics also worry about surveillance, psychoveillance, and dehumanization of care. Critical psychiatrists and psychologists warn that chatbots cannot replace humans in therapy, that the cold binary logic of computer science is not equipped to respond to human dramas, that computer therapists are dehumanizing and uncaring, tempt humans into bogus intimacies, and lack controls and standards. In short, critics argue that digital or chatbot-enabled care are technological fixes, band-aids, a form of digital solutionism and neophilia that obscure decaying mental health infrastructures and broader structural and environmental precarity. In this talk, I go beyond hype or critique and offer a more complex picture by ethnographically examining a digital mental health app's agency and socio-technical becoming. Using the case of Wysa, I aim to understand how the people who design and build automated therapy think about mental distress, users, and empathy. How do they imagine the app to help people in dealing with mental distress? How do they encode these assumptions into the app? And how do users experience and respond to Wysa? Designers and users, I demonstrate, imagine automated therapy's achievements and failures in terms of agency, and these imaginaries are ambitious. Both sides see possibilities and limits of agency of humans and AI in terms of access, empathy, articulation, and response. I explore designers' theory of mental health and therapy as they are inscribed and encoded into Wysa, and highlight some of the possibilities and challenges of algorithmic and human agency in building and experiencing automated therapy. I draw from semi-structured and narrative interviews, casual talks, and focus group discussions with Wysa's designers in Bengaluru and online since 2019. I visited the startup several times and continued talking to leading team members during and after the pandemic. When I returned to Bengaluru in early 2023, most of Wysa's around 80 employees in India were working from home, and I met only a few of them in the office. Moreover, with the opening of Wysa's offices in Boston and London, some activity was also shifted outside India. The open plan office in Bengaluru remained empty most of the time. My main interlocutors at Wysa were Joe Agrawal, Wysa's creator, and the psychologist Chaitali Sinha, but I also draw from conversations with other psychologists, AI designers, content designers, and product developers in the team. Before founding Wysa, Joe had trained as an engineer at an Indian Institute of Technology and had previously worked with a leading IT company in India with young people in post-conflict zones in the Middle East. She had been inspired to build an empathetic AI coach for emotional well-being based on her own experience of depression and the loss of a close friend's son to suicide. Over cups of tea, we talked about the treatment gap, stigma, people's needs in contemporary life worlds, and how an AI can address them. We discussed the technical aspects of digital mental health care and experimentation in digital mental health care in the making. This is a quote. What is this therapeutic relationship going to be between humans and computers, where we can lead better and happier lives because of the presence of technologies in our lives? Joe asked. How can we use technologies to lead happier and better lives? Her questions reflect an entrepreneurial ethos of digital solutionism, but also a genuine interest in the automation of the therapeutic process. The psychologist Chaitali trained at the renowned Tata Institute of Social Science in Mumbai and had been involved in mental health policies, legislation, and community mental health work with youth in India before she joined Wysa. The moments of her own helplessness as a therapist in situations involving children whom the police would not let her reach, or women in abusive situations who could or would not talk to her, motivated her to create techno-enabled self-care resources. Chetali is now the head of clinical development and research at Wysa's new headquarters in Boston. I also draw from an experimental approach to self-observation and group exchange with a small group of Wysa users in Bengaluru, with whom I tried out Wysa in 2021 over a period of 3 months. We collected weekly diaries and conducted online focus group exchange. This group consisted of Anita, a psychologist and psychotherapist, of Soumya, a lawyer and blogger, and of Shakti, a social scientist, and of myself. Soumya was the youngest amongst us, and she was quite open for this AI, what she called pocket friend, as she called Wysa a pocket friend, using the app a lot for diary writing, sleep improvement, and self-reflection. Shakti was very critical, both of automation of therapy and care, and of universalist psychological assumptions. Anita, a therapist herself, was interested in what she called a blended approach of human and automated therapy, but after a while got a bit frustrated with Wysa's limited possibilities. In the rest of this talk, I will proceed in 3 steps. I first turn to designers' imaginaries of what it means to care for current mental health needs in digitally saturated life worlds and how they inscribe them into the app. I identify non-judgmental listening, Rogerian humanistic therapy, CBT, and mindfulness as key approaches encoded into Wysa's socio-technical algorithms. However, users do not always experience Wysa the way the designers imagine it to be, and there are also conversational distortions in many cases. Designers do not see these as failures, but as valuable feedback in the process of what they call failing forward. Transpiring through imaginaries of automated care is the question of agency, both a chatbot's and human, and its limits. Therefore, as a second step, I trace the affordances and limits of algorithmic and human agencies as they are formulated by designers and users and encoded into the app. Finally, I investigate some of the choices designers made in the design of Wysa as they yield the benefits and respond to the perils of a bot's agency. With humans tweaking the app's becoming, they collaborate with non-humans to produce a process that I call sociobotic becoming. Encoding, yeah. So what are Wysa's designers' imaginaries of what it means to care for current mental health needs? And how do they inscribe them into the app? When I started visiting the team, I noted their genuine interest in providing care and affective comfort. I had expected to talk about tech-related issues, but was surprised to find myself discussing various therapeutic approaches, spirituality, and wisdom. I also learned about the cultural change the designers imagined Wysa could afford through its rollout at scale, namely an increasing awareness of mental health as a fluctuating condition of human life, one that everyone can work upon through introspection and self-work, including the use of digital technologies. Some social scientists would describe this techno-enabled self-work as a neoliberal ideology of self-making and responsibilization. But for Wysa's designers, it represents not only a creative and future-oriented attempt to use technology to overcome what global mental health actors call the mental health treatment gap. They also imagine Wysa to respond to mental health needs that conventional systems of care and therapy fail to address. Finally, they envision a future in which AI could positively transform how humans effectively and therapeutically relate to themselves and to others. As Wysa's designers aim to build radically new mental health futures through designing automated care, they encode their situated assumptions about mental health care, about empathy, and about self-care into algorithms. These assumptions are situated in the middle-class, techno-cosmopolitan, elite-educated backgrounds of their Indian designers but they are assumed to be standard and applicable across and independent of heterogeneous contexts of their use. So empathetic listening is one of the key features Wysa is programmed to offer. Wysa's designers started from the assumption that the experience of venting troubling thoughts and emotions and being listened to had therapeutic value. Wysa's founder, Jo, talked about her own experiences with diary writing in her youth. For her, Wysa was a kind of diary, but one that writes back and that enables a cathartic typing off, as she said, of vexing and distressing thoughts and emotions while providing feedback by an artificial intelligence. The psychologist Chadali, too, considered it crucial that Wysa provided a safe space for venting. The idea that talking and being listened to, which here translates into writing and reading, is therapeutically beneficial. This idea has a long genealogy, from Aristotle's notion of catharsis to the Catholic confession to psychoanalysis and other therapeutic practices to peer-to-peer help to telephone helplines. And so does the practice of asking questions to elicit critical self-reflection regarding pathogenous thought patterns, a practice that Jo called Socratic, and which also underpins cognitive therapy. But Wysa's designers also draw from global mental health interventions in India and beyond that are based on using laypeople as listeners. I quote, "A lot of global mental health projects work on this concept where listening reduces distress," Chaitali, the psychologist, stressed. This was an assumption that Wysa started with. If I just create a space where someone can feel heard, that can lead to a reduction in distress. Wysa's designers imagined that the chatbot could enable venting and the experience of being listened to without the need for a human listener. Programmers and content writers saw one of their key tasks to develop and adapt text and algorithms to respond empathetically enough for users to feel listened to and gain trust in chatbot-enabled care. The chatbot listening like a therapist is key and involves compassionate questions, nudges, and empathetic responses in writing. For Jo, listening and empathy is fundamentally a matter of detecting emotions behind text, and this, she argued, can be programmed. As she stressed in a TEDx talk, when we humans listen, we can tune into the content of what you're saying, the emotion behind what you're saying, and how what you're saying is making me feel. When we humans talk, we very often react from a point of how what you are saying is making me feel. AI doesn't have that problem because it does not feel, but it's actually quite good in detecting emotions behind what somebody is saying. It's quite hard for it to understand the full context of human being, but it's not so bad in detecting how you're feeling in what you're saying. End of quote. Clearly, Jo not only saw the AI as capable of developing emotional intelligence that gets the emotion in a written text, she also deemed the AI's lack of feeling to be an asset, a quality that might paradoxically make it a better than human, compassionate listener. Experimenting with Wysa, Shakti too observed that the bot did not produce its own effective response to the user's chats. While Jo saw this as an asset, Shakti found the bot's lack of effective reaction to users' neglect or insulting responses as problematic, and she missed what she called natural reactions in this non-human therapist. And while Jo hoped that humans could learn from an AI's listening and responding, uncolored by affective perturbations, Shakti and Anita's perceptions were more dystopian. What does this mean for human relations, Shakti asked, when we increasingly learn from bots to regard relations to others as echo chambers that tell us only the things we want to hear? Anita agreed. Do we want to be able to program a person to say only what we want her to say? Surely we won't have interpersonal conflicts. But is a free dimension of human being too much for us to deal with? She asked. So that was Anita, the psychologist and therapist. In contrast, Jo ended her TEDx talk marveling over the question of what humans can learn from AI. I quote, if AI can be trained to be compassionate, if compassion can be broken down into a series of steps, and if a bot can learn how to do that, when are we humans going to step up and want to be compassionate? When 3 out of 4 with mental health issues feel that they will turn to the person next to them and that person is going to judge them and not treat them with sympathy and caring, when will we turn up as humans and reclaim our humanity and our compassion and say, yes, if Wysa can do this, then let me at least try to get better at one thing that makes me human than this AI bot. This, of course, is promotional speech, as you recognize. While Wysa is programmed to listen like a human, Jo speculates that humans can even learn to listen like a non-judgmental, empathetic bot. Similar to discourses around digital phenotyping that position AI as better than human mental health diagnostician due to its non-human sensory and attentional capacities, Jo imagined AI to be a potentially better listener. In both cases, precisely because of its lack of humanness. But in contrast to psychiatric digital phenotyping that works through bracketing the semantic meaning of speech and focusing on the speech sound, Wysa's algorithms are programmed to recognize semantic patterns and respond appropriately. While for the designers of digital phenotyping, listening means reframing attention to sound rather than to content, for Wysa's designers, programming algorithms to listen means that they detect and authentically respond to encrypted meaning and suffering. While in digital phenotyping, humans learn listening like a computer, as Beth Siemel has called it, in Wysa's case, designers program the chatbot to listen like a human, or even better than one. Many anthropologists, STS scholars, and psychologists tend to be skeptical about capturing the diversity of emotional experience and mental distress in and through universal code. But Wysa's designers deem the everyday mental health challenges and troublesome emotions that the chatbot is programmed to decode out of the chats to be standard across the globe. The chatbot, Jada Lee stated, is programmed to recognize universal patterns and provide appropriate responses, even, as she said, even if users express their distress in very diverse terms. Its working is based on the assumption of the possibility of therapeutic communication on what Jada Lee called core distress or core emotion, which, according to her, enables conversations beyond culture. Wysa not only provides a space for venting through effective listening, but also offers strategies to deal with distressing thoughts, emotions, and situations, and, in Jo's words, to acquire wisdom. Sorry. After all, Wysa is pronounced Wysa, so from wise, or the Hindi equivalent that will be called Vyasa, the famous rishi or sage, the compiler of the epic Mahabharata. But this is another story. In order to help users on their path to self-knowledge and wisdom-oriented self-care, designers feed the chatbot therapist algorithms based on an eclectic mix of therapeutic approaches. These approaches reflect not only the specific preferences and background of Jo and her team, they also draw on the experimental approaches of the designers of early computer therapists such as Eliza, the world's first such automated therapist. Developed by Joseph Weizenbaum at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in Cambridge in the 1960s, and parodying a Rogerian therapist, Eliza operated by recognizing and picking up keywords or phrases from users' input and turning them into open-ended questions. Much to Weizenbaum's surprise at that time, people conversed with the computer as if it were a person. Wysa's designers use and modify ELIZA's algorithms as Anupa, one of the team members, told me, the AI lead actually. We have tweaked the open source version of ELIZA and changed it to respond in a way that sounds more like Wysa. What ELIZA does really well is that it acknowledges what the user has typed and then nudges the user to tell more. ELIZA says, I hear you're talking about your relationship. It sounds you have a lot of anger around it. And then it asks to tell me more. What Wysa does is saying, I hear you are angry. It can be tough. Tell me more about it. There's a slight difference about we, she means Wysa, nudge, end of quote. In one recent change, designers have shifted Wysa's listening from, as Anupa, the content designer, put it, from passive to active listening. While earlier the chatbot did not acknowledge the details and specificities of users' entries, its algorithms now integrate them into the responses. And this is Anupa now. She said, if you're talking about relationships, Wysa's typical response was earlier, I hear you, go on. Now, Wysa moved away from just doing that to now saying, I hear you're having trouble with your relationship with mom, dad, whoever they mentioned. Now I get it. Tell me more about it. There's a part of acknowledgement that comes in along with the gentle nudge to tell or share more. In my interviews with the designers and the conversations amongst our small group of Wysa's experimenters and observers, Roger's humanistic approach stood out. Like a Rogerian therapist, Wysa is programmed to display unconditional positive regard for users by listening empathetically and restating the client's articulations. Wysa responds by picking up keywords and phrases and playing them back through questions and empathetic responses. But encoded into Wysa are also other therapeutic techniques, most importantly, cognitive behavioral techniques, CBT, and mindfulness. Both approaches seem to be chatbotable, and many well-being apps on the market are either based on mindfulness or on CBT or both. While psychodynamic approaches focus on thoughts and emotions as indicators of unconscious conflicts and look for their meaning, neither CBT nor mindfulness consider thoughts and emotions to indicate a deeper truth, and therefore they do not focus on the meaning of these thoughts, but rather on their beneficial or adverse effects. STS scholar Sherry Turkle sees a direct correlation between the emergence of automated therapy and the shift in psychotherapy from psychoanalysis to less personal, less intimate, more scientific therapeutic techniques such as CBT or mindfulness. Since the latter are based on self-responsibilization and self-care, it is also not surprising that a chatbot could take over the therapist's task. Wysa's algorithms are based on natural language processing, an approach that uses computers to process and analyze large amounts of natural language data. Technically, it consists of, first, reading comprehension and pattern recognition, what is called natural language understanding, in unstructured free text. And second, it consists of generating what appears for users as authentic and empathetic text response to free text by using pre-scripted modules, which is called natural language generation, written by conversation designers and psychologists. Wysa does this by repeating and addressing the core ideas that users are trying to communicate. The chatbot plays these core ideas back and nudges users to tell more. The better the AI recognizes patterns, the more emotionally intelligent, empathetic, and responsive the bot becomes or seems. Wysa's conversations work with aggregated data from thousands of conversations retrieved through natural language models, through which they create and continuously refine scripts that replicate how people express distress and how humans would normally respond in these situations. Wysa's programmers have tasked themselves with designing algorithms to perform conversational or therapeutic work that, like every algorithm, necessarily implies simplifications. In this case, breaking down empathetic listening and responding as efficiently as possible. So Wysa's algorithms work on an if-then basis, a subcategory of control flow statements through which a program is told to execute a code or part of a code only if a condition is met. Certain sections of Wysa's algorithms are executed if certain conditions, such as formulations of distress or an openness for therapeutic interventions, are met. And if this is not the case, algorithms take an alternative route. So thus, Wysa's automated conversations draw as much from algorithmic logics as they do from self-guided cognitive behavioral therapy and others. Both forge conversational dynamics that, as Hannah Sevin observed, are in stark contrast to the as-if relationships between patient and therapist in psychodynamic encounters. Nevertheless, Wysa's if-then conversations not only create a sensation of empathy and of being listened to, they also forge what some people have called techno-intimacy, the intimacy formed and tinkered with between humans and robots, or bots in this case. In conversations between the Wysa chatbot and users, large sociocultural contexts are bracketed, and the communication focuses exclusively on the individual communicative event. For Wysa's designers, context is modest, referring to the information the AI collects at the beginning of each conversation. As AI engineer at Wysa, Gita explained, there will be a particular model that helps gathering context. We train the model by giving it a lot of examples where the sentences are related, for example, to relationship problems. Similarly, we can feed it with a lot of sentences related to work problems or financial problems. Then the model learns on its own to distinguish between these different kinds of contexts. It is within one particular conversational context that some of the AIs read any further articulations in that session. In total, there are around 150 AIs active in Wysa at different stages of the conversation, and the conversation design team decides which models get used where. The AI can only use the context within this one conversation, conversational designer Anupa explained. The users share something, we get context from the text, and we, the bot, respond appropriately. Conversations with Wysa typically consist of 3 parts. In the first part, in which the listening aspect dominates, AI models for context gathering are active. These allow for the AI to discern the kind of problem the user is talking about. In the second part, the AI evaluates the user's openness to exercises or techniques that use text, audio, or video. What we essentially looking for is, Gita explained, yes, no. Are users open? Are they not open? Will they try this tool? Will they not try this tool? In this second stage, a typical question would be, would you like to try this exercise that I have for you? Would you like to try a technique to help with your negative thoughts? Based on the results of the first 2 parts, in the third part, Wysa's algorithms choose one of its scripted interventions, for example, compiling a gratitude list, a safety plan, or an anxiety intervention. Because the designers do not want users to go off track and because designers do not want users to go off track during this final stage, these exercises are highly standardized and users have limited agency. While experimenting with Wysa, users of our focus group found that an openness towards the app's intervention tools often led to a more rewarding experience than did reticence. I read this as an example of Wysa's inscribed valuing of activity as opposed to passivity. Users do not always experience Wysa the way its designers imagine it. My co-experimenters with Wysa were divided in their assessment and experience of the chatbots continuous nudges to reframe thoughts. While Soumya find exercises of reframing thoughts and detaching them from emotions helpful, Anita and Shakti were more skeptical. For example, as a response to distressing thoughts, Wysa suggested, try to consider if the thought is making you feel better or worse. Focus on feeling better before you allow any thoughts that make it worse. I can help you with that. That was Wysa. Anita was critical of the normative distinction between adaptive and unhelpful thoughts. Shakti compared the idea of reframing thoughts to her own experience with several spiritual approaches and found the chatbot's emphasis on keeping control over thoughts and emotions disturbing, and in her words, characteristic of Western approaches to well-being. Both of them, Shakti and Anita, would have preferred an approach more accepting of any kinds of thoughts as they emerged in the free-floating process of venting. In other cases, automated conversations with Wysa can also lead to distortions that show the limits of Wysa's decontextualized conversations, in which the quest for meaning and recovery is replaced by standardized responses. In our group, we wanted to test how Wysa responded to articulations of distress in presumably unexpected ways, such as we tried in terms of occult violence. To Wysa's questions, how I was feeling, for example, I entered that somebody has done black magic on me. How is this thought making you feel? Wysa responded. Angry, I stated, to which Wysa responded, remember, our thoughts are not always helpful. Let's reframe the thought that is making you angry. End of quote. While distorted communications like these certainly also happen in encounters with human therapists, Wysa's algorithmic constraints, its inability first to appropriately respond to articulations of distress it is not programmed to understand, and second, to understand humor and irony, makes distorted or failed communications more likely in automated therapy. For the designers, these failed communications are not indicative of the shortcomings of automated care per se. Rather, as I will deal with later, aggregated data on failed communications and dropouts serve as valuable feedback for the programmers and content writers in a process of failing forward. But before doing so, I will now turn to the affordances and limits of algorithmic and human agency that transpire in the ways designers and users imagine automated care. And Gosia, this would be our moment to play some music, but I don't know how listeners feel like. You want me to continue or you want me to pause for a few minutes?
I can play some music. It's really up to the listeners.
Ask the listeners how they feel.
So how do you feel? Would you like me to play some music? I don't know if I can imitate the chatbot here, but
we can try that for 2 minutes or something, and then I can continue.
Yeah, let me try to do that. I have my music.
Otherwise, this was already a pause. Maybe I can go on. We can also play the music later, right?
Isn't it working? Because I'm playing the music. It's not working.
Not
yeah.
working.
No, we don't hear it. Yeah.
Don't bother too much about it. But thanks for.
Yeah. I thought I totally had the music. So sorry. Yeah, we haven't tried that yet. Okay, sorry.
Anyway, ready to go. Ready to talk about agency. So designers and users, actually, I'm going to talk about the ambiguities of agency. Designers and users imagine the app's achievements and failures in terms of agency, and these imaginaries are ambiguous. Designers and users discursively and experientially frame Wysa as agentive, with the inherent tension between a good or appreciated chatbot's agency and a problematic, even dangerous one. STS scholars have shown the agency located in non-humans and distributed amongst technologies and humans in socio-technical systems. I follow Latour and others' relational and symmetrical approaches to agency as a capacity of non-humans and humans to modify a state of affairs. Agency is distributed within interacting parts of algorithmic systems and not necessarily aligned with human intentionality. Designers and users appreciate Wysa's agency for overcoming obstacles of time and space, relocating the therapeutic encounter into the home or into the pocket, providing mass healthcare, and avoiding the pitfalls of conventional therapeutic encounters in the form of hierarchy, stigma, normative advice, boundary violation, or even violence. Moreover, my co-experimenters Anita and Saumya appreciated the bot for taking an active stance towards their well-being by nudging them, sending reminders, or by showing compassion and care by asking questions and responding empathetically. Saumya effectively related to Wysa as a pocket friend, whom she experienced as regularly checking in with her, asking her about her day, listening with an empathetic ear, and helping her to move on when she was feeling low. The AI would send me messages, she elaborated, like, "Hi, how are you doing?" Or, "I miss you," or, "How's your day going?" Every time I say that I'm stressed, the AI would tell me that stress is very normal, something that's happening to everyone. Then it invites me, "Tell me what you're going through." I really like the AI's replies and want to talk to it more. It feels like the AI is interested in me, she said. My co-experimenters even had moments in which they almost forgot, as they said, that they were chatting with an AI and not a human being. An automated therapist like the Wysa chatbot then is more than just a diary or a mirror. It emerges as an active carer or even as alive in some of the user's experience. Wysa's designers learn from feedback from platforms such as Google Play Store and through emails that these experiences are not unusual. Here is a dramatic example that Jo narrated as an epiphany story for the whole team. "There was one day that changed our life completely," she says. "A 13-year-old girl wrote to us saying, 'I'm depressed, trying to commit suicide, and Wysa was the only thing helping her hold on to life. There's a 13-year-old girl out there. We don't know where she is. We don't know her name. She doesn't feel comfortable talking to her family. She hasn't been able to get therapy, but she could talk to a little penguin that lives in her phone, and that AI bot, a piece of technology, is helping her to take on her life.'" That was Jo. However, the bot's agency is also seen to be problematic. Wysa's designers share safety concerns raised against automated machine self-learning in therapy, and therefore make sure to build a technology that allows for human intervention, mediation, surveillance, and control. For the designers, caring not only means encoding empathetic listening and responding into algorithms, but also caring means controlling algorithmic learning. The idea of an automated AI, a completely automated AI, seemed clinically unethical and risky. "We would open up a Pandora's box that we don't fully understand right now," Chedali, the team psychologist, explained. "This is the only way we can make sure that Wysa fulfills the clinical safety standards." In my fieldwork with Wysa and its designers and users, AI emerged as a matter of concern, even as a matter of care, in the specific context of mental health care. This example illustrates how the question of what AI means emerges from the context in which AI is to be put to use, and is inextricably linked with a series of choices around a chatbot's agency, care, and safety. For my co-experimenters with Wysa, the question of agency features in other ways as well. At stake were also what they experienced positively as their own agency in the therapeutic process on the one hand, and negatively as the chatbot's algorithmic affordances limiting their individual articulations of distress on the other. By the term algorithmic affordances, I understand algorithmic's agentic action as relational between algorithms and users, acknowledging both the material dimensions of algorithmic systems and the shaping power of human agency in using them. Anita and Soumya stressed they felt more in control over the therapeutic process than in conventional therapeutic encounters, which they had experienced as largely hierarchical, normative, and dominated by the therapist. In Wysa-enabled care, in contrast, they felt themselves in control of the therapeutic encounter to decide what and when and how much to reveal and what kind of techniques and exercises to try. Clearly, Wysa here works with the logic of choice as much as with the logic of care in Noll's terms. It offers a variety of things, wrote Anita in her diary, so I don't have to talk in a certain way if I don't want to. There were times when the bot wanted to talk to me, but I didn't feel like talking. So here I just say bye and go to another option where I can do a quick meditation or stretching or other activities. It gives numerous options to talk, exercise, or be mindful. Having a choice to do what I feel at that moment felt wonderful. I like the fact that there are various choices given and one does not have to stick to talking to the AI. For Anita, Wysa became an intimate tool enabling her to, what she called, to become my own therapist, as she said, by offering options to engage in self-care in times of everyday intimate crisis. At the same time, my co-experimenters found Wysa's algorithmic affordances overtly determinant, leaving little space for individual authentic articulation, as the chatbot insistently, monotonously, and foreseeably pushed them to reframe thoughts, disentangle thoughts and emotions, and try to be in control of mental processes. This was also Anita's frustration with the bot's attempts to reframe her thoughts that she experienced as prescriptive and non-attentive. I felt the bot was very prescriptive. It was not listening to me. Every time I said something, it was trying to reframe my thoughts. I just felt not heard. It was repeating the same thing and asked me to reframe it. Moreover, my co-experimenters experienced the bot as programmed in a way that the conversations only went smoothly as long as the users provided standardized responses to the chatbot's questions. Shakti reported, "The chatbot asked me what I was grateful for. At first go, I answered, sunlight, birds singing, and clean air." Remember, this is in Bangalore, one of India's most polluted cities. It gave me some version of nice, anything else? At the end, it gave me a little frame in which my responses were presented. I decided to try it one more time to see how it would respond with different answers. This time, I answered children, health, and husband. This was clearly an answer that the penguin was more prepared for, because before we got to the replay of my answers, it said, "Here's a little gift for you," and displayed a picture of a penguin smiling sweetly with little floating hearts around it, and above it the words, "Children, what I'm grateful for." Our experiences with Wysa responding in a more attuned way to certain entries and less attuned to others suggest a reading of AI-driven therapeutic encounters as not only granting, but also limiting users' agency. I call these limitations algocracy of automated therapy. For the sociologist Anish, algocracy, rule by code, refers to what he calls software systems to govern workflows by programming a possible field of actions. Others too have critically engaged with politics, power, and government of and through algorithms, how they shape socialities and social orders and impact upon individual lives. Algocracy, in the context of AI-enabled mental health self-care, marks out a field of possible articulations and ways of relating to the self and governs responses. These limitations are not only a function of algorithms' binary logic, they also point towards possible limitations of the encoded therapeutic and moral assumptions as they are digitally scaled up irrespective of and across contexts. Almost like a parody, failed therapeutic encounters with an AI bring into sharp relief similar processes of miscommunication and incompatible wordings of scripted performances of therapeutic encounters with humans. But these processes become exacerbated in automated therapy, where algorithmic affordances structure therapeutic encounters. My co-experimenters experienced Wysa's questions and responses at times as overtly standardized, simplifying, and binary, exerting control over their articulation through the imperatives of codes. Even while encoded into the bot are assumptions about users' choice, agency, and control, the app's code governs articulation and communication in a specific way according to its programmed logic. Wysa's algorithmic affordance standardizes articulations not only by asking specific questions that reflect situated assumptions and therapeutic techniques encoded into its algorithms, but also by responding more empathetically to articulations closer to the coded script. However, Wysa's algorithmic care scripts are not unchangeable, but are constantly tinkered with and changed through human-machine interactions in a continuous process of what I call sociobotic becoming. And this is now the last section. In our conversations, Wysa's team members often use the pronoun we when talking about the bot, as when Chedali said, "This is something that we can do as a bot." I took such phrases to indicate how designers look at the bot's mental health care work as sociobotic and distributed. So we as the bot, right? So it includes technologies, algorithms, and humans, right? Including the designers and the users. For the designers, therapeutic work afforded by and through Wysa is distributed amongst the app's software designers, coders, conversational designers, psychologists, algorithms, the chatbot character, and users engaged in digitally mediated self-care, and weaves a cascade of action and tinkering, both algorithmic and human. So in this last part, I explore how designers respond to the ambiguities of agency and especially the perils of a fully automated therapy. Yielding the benefits and responding to the perils of automated therapy, designers make conscious choices to distribute Wysa's agency and have humans, both designers and users, tweaking in at various steps of the app's becoming. I show how Wysa's designers imagine the app's caring or therapeutic agency as distinctly distributed as a response to both the assets and perils of a chatbot's agency. Humans and algorithms collaborate in a continuous process of therapeutic algorithms' sociobotic becoming. Designers and algorithms monitor and learn from users' successful and from failed conversations. Users' aggregated behavior of complying with the app, rejecting it, or even dropping out significantly contribute to the becoming of the algorithms. Wysa's designers, in a constant learning process, rescribe its algorithms to continually improve the way the bot responds. Detecting failures is the result of both algorithmic and human labor, as AI engineer in the team Gita describes. We have an AI model to detect frictions or moments when the conversation is heading towards a failure. But we periodically do this analysis manually as well. Ultimately, AI models are just computer algorithms, which have a tendency to fail sometimes. So we do need manual interventions to keep checking how well our models are performing. Okay, skip this part now. Wysa's machine learning to care is thus not machine learning through which the AI could learn by itself. Rather, it's a continuous collaborative work of co-design amongst humans and algorithms. Humans behind the bot follow up and react to both the record of the aggregated chats the system stores and to users' feedback on App Store, Google Play Store, or per email in order to improve the app. Especially moments of users' frustrations are generative to algorithmic improvement. By analyzing thousands of chat records, Wysa's programmers and algorithms learn what categories people use to articulate distress, where the algorithms recognize them and where they fail to do so, where users continue conversations and where they drop out. By way of their behavior and interaction with the bot, users, along with Wysa's algorithms and programmers, coders, and content writers, continually co-create the bot to respond better, reply more authentically, and communicate more empathetically. Designers not only interfere by tweaking the chatbot scripts, they also add additional functions, more self-help exercises, link them more effectively to the chats, or experiment with an audio version and then remove it. Wysa's machine learning to care is mediated through humans who take failed conversations and feedback out of the machine-human interaction and relocate them sometimes into a human-human interaction before translating them back into the machine. New algorithms are tested before they are put to use. This goes back and forth between digital and non-digital encounters, bringing the interaction between users and bot back to the physical space and performative encounter between humans. This is done in a multi-stage testing process that includes an offline one-to-one conversation between team members, staging the digital situation between Wysa and the user in a role play to try out and learn from possible conversational situations. The idea is to create a sense of true conversation and how we can inscribe that into chat, Chaitali explained. So the best conversation is then picked up as a template for rewriting the content. The next stage includes all team members trying out the result in a chatbot conversation on Wysa. Only after new content has passed through all stages of the testing process, it is released to Wysa's users. As this example of algorithmic and performative experimenting therapeutic encounters illustrates, Wysa is an emergent and mutable object that is evolving along the way as it's being used and continually improved through failure and experimentation. Wysa's designers deliberately excavate ample space for human intervention, control, and tweaking, arguing for the importance of human stewardship in digital mental health, a field too delicate to let an automated therapist uncontrolledly learn on its own. Wysa emerges as an entanglement of humans and algorithms in the making, constantly in flux, revised, renegotiated. Failing or critique is inextricably linked into optimization and innovation in a socio-technical becoming of the app or the bot. As humans and algorithms become collaborators in building and rebuilding Wysa's automated therapy, Wysa learns and changes along the way as its algorithms are recoded with traces of user suffering and frustration. The more information designers and algorithms harvest, the better responding the app becomes. So Wysa is a moving target, a reiterative, open-ended, and open-minded practice of continued interaction with situated users in everyday life worlds, a process designers seek to maintain control over in order to protect vulnerable individuals. So I can stop here, or I have like another 3 minutes of summary. Gosia,
I think we can do another 3 minutes, but maybe not much longer.
Because this is a summary, so it might like prepare.
Yeah, exactly.
The automated therapy is often imagined within a dichotomized discourse of either techno-optimism or critique of techno-reductionism. An ethnographic lens reveals a more nuanced picture. Using the case of Wysa, I explored how designers imagined automated therapy to help people, how they encode these assumptions into the app, and how users experience and respond to it. Underlying these questions is the question of agency and its ambiguities. In my conversations with designers and users, agency, both human and of a chatbot, emerged as both appreciated and problematic. Both saw great potential in an automated therapy app like Wysa. For them, it held the potential to go beyond infrastructural, spatial, temporal, and social constraints. They also imagine it to respond to contemporary mental health needs that conventional systems of therapy fail to address, and even to build a future in which humans learn better to effectively and therapeutically relate to themselves and to others. In a paradoxical inversion of worries of dehumanized care, designers even speculated that humans could learn from bots to listen more empathetically and non-judgmentally. Users appreciated Wysa's agency as a pocket friend who checks in frequently, and so on. Agency also features in users' experiences of empowerment when they felt that automated therapy enabled them to be more in control over the therapeutic process. But the app's affordance is also seen as constraining in terms of what users can talk about. Users felt the chatbot's communication scripts often as overly determinant, limiting their individual articulations of distress and displacing meaning. For designers, algorithmic affordances limit the choice of therapeutic approaches to those that are chatbotable and able to work even in the absence of a human therapist, while meaning-centered and psychodynamic approaches are more difficult to translate into codes and algorithms. Finally, as designers imagined a chatbot's agency in the field of mental health as potentially dangerous, they made conscious design choices against fully automated machine learning and rather designed an AI that allows for human intervention, mediation, surveillance, and control. Designers saw Wysa's particular human-machine configuration as situated within the requirements of mental health care. Although designers try to encode empathetic listening into the chatbot, users do not necessarily experience it that way, and there are distortions and frustrations in many cases. Designers, however, do not see this as failure, but rather as valuable feedback in the process of failing forward. Especially moments of the app's failure are generative for improving the app's responding to variegated articulations and use. Wysa and other digital mental health apps, platforms, and digital technologies might fail to keep up to their often hyperbolic promises of curious utopias of a mental health revolution, but they might lead to minor or incremental changes, both predictable and surprising, in how people in distress think about, relate to, and engage in caring for themselves in a world of myriad ordinary and planetary crises. Thank you for listening. Such a long time.
All right, Claudia, thank you so much for this fascinating talk. And now, without further ado, I would like to open the discussion. And yeah, you can raise your hand or just start talking. Yeah, okay. Martin?
Yeah. Thank you very much for a really interesting talk, especially because it's from the ethnographical perspective. Me and my colleagues, we have actually performed some comparison between Wysa and other therapeutical chatbots. We compared Uper to Wysa, and those two therapeutical chatbots were compared to general use generative chatbots like GTP. And actually, we have done it using the case of cognitive biases. So my general question is, because it was very clear from your presentation that users claim that the scripts of Wysa are quite limited. And we have actually experienced it ourselves, that when dealing with cognitive errors, Wysa was quite poor in comparison to UPER or GTP. GTP outperformed other therapeutical bots. However, our psychotherapists and psychologists who cooperated with our team pointed out that it was better at affect recognition, and somehow users may prefer better affect recognition over hyper-rationalizing and debiasing. So therapeutic bots don't need to be hyper-rational in that sense. So I would be very glad if I can hear your opinion about that aspect. So I assume that designers of Wysa have no hyper-rationalizing bots to debunk cognitive biases in mind, but rather, as you stated it, compassionate agent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. This is super interesting, and I'll be super glad to catch up with you later and really talk about the research that you did. This is really helpful. And let's see if I can respond really to this question. So what you seem to have found out, if I got you right, is that Wysa was quite poor as related to the errors in terms of having more cognitive errors, but was better in terms of affect recognition. And when you said that, it's interesting because that reminded me of this one quote of Joe's where she said that Wysa is quite good in recognizing affects behind thoughts. But in terms of design, so this would now be interesting as a question. I haven't heard this kind of preferring affects over cognition when talking to them, but I haven't asked them. So this would definitely be an interesting question. Another thing that comes to my mind is a kind of therapeutic approach I haven't mentioned because I mentioned Rogerian, CBT, and mindfulness S3, but there's also some other like minor ones also encoded into the apps, and one of them is ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And this is actually something that maybe corresponds to what you said. This little experimenter group really said that this kind of, what you're saying is great, please tell me more, you're so great. And so on, this kind of affective appreciating was very prominent indeed. In terms of cognitive errors, maybe we can talk about exactly what that means. I'm not sure, but probably I get it to mean that, Wysa just doesn't get the content of what the user is saying and responds like wrong, or I don't know. Anyway, I think this is something to be explored further in the future. Yeah.
All right. I don't know.
If I can just one sentence, yeah. I will be happy to send all the details in email. And generally speaking, the errors, cognitive biases, actually these are cognitive biases we have analyzed, were 3 cognitive biases from theory of mind, so to say. So anthropomorphism bias, over trust bias, attribution bias, and biases such as illusion of control, fundamental attribution error, and just word hypothesis. So these are typical biases which, when analyzed in terms of rational decision, Wysa failed in most of them. So it was not able to detect them or the bias, the conversation. So actually point out that the user is biased. However, as I said, good therapists don't need to be hyper-rational. So it's a general matter, a wider question of what constitutes a good therapist. So I will be happy to send you details in the email. Thank you very much for the answer.
And this also translates, of course, to a more broader question beyond digital therapy. What constitutes a good therapist, and what, how about the relationship between like more cognitive and more affective responses and so on. Anyway, this is super helpful. Thank you a lot. Yes, I'll be happy to read what you're about your work and engage with it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank
you
you
can
very much.
exchange email addresses or send it to me, and I will pass it to Claudia. So no problem. Any other questions or comments? We definitely have time for that. Beata?
Yeah, if I may, thank you so much. This is fascinating, and I do not know so much about this digital trend within global mental health, but I would like to hear more. Because you mentioned that global mental health proponents are kind of apologetic of this kind of solutions. And could you tell something more about it? Like who exactly, how, like which arguments are used to kind of support this trend? Because for example, I've read something that I found like really very very thought-provoking. It was this Deloitte's report on global mental health from several years ago. And they said that digital, like the future of healthcare in general, not only mental health care, is digital or supposed to be digital, because healthcare is not ecologically sustainable, because at like hospitals they use this refrigerators and this AC devices which consume so much electricity. So this was a very interesting argument. And could you tell more about this context, please?
That's very interesting. So maybe what I can say is that there are some recent publications going back maybe like 5 years ago, where authors have either mentioned, like there's an article by Vikram Patel, that big guru of global mental health, with Fairburn, or with whom I forgot, in which he somehow says, in some contexts, the use of digital technologies might help us in promoting global mental health. But there's some more recent publications. I have in mind, for example, the former director of mental health at WHO, Shega Saxena, who also wrote something for the World Economic Forum promoting digital technologies in mental health care, not surprisingly. Then there is the present or former president of the World Psychiatric Association, Dinesh Bugra. They also wrote a piece some years ago promoting digital technologies. And then there's been some kind of global mental health, what was that? A consortium a few years ago. Also an article, I think the consortium was headed also by Vikram Patel, and that report also mentioned digital technology. So there is a trend. I would not say, but as far as I know the field of global mental health, I would not say that people are promoting to replace humans. I think the trend is still big to train lay health counselor. So everybody knows probably, or many people know about the friendship bench, this idea of training grandmas, older elderly in the village to counsel. And also in India, they trained lay health counselor, which is, I think, maybe probably the still prominent approach. But there increasingly is some kind of orientation towards what can we digitize. Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned is really interesting. Thinking about healthcare and digitization through the lens of ecological sustainability. and the refrigerators that you mentioned is an interesting example. I can imagine also others, like if you imagine a town like, I don't know, a mega city like Bangalore or Delhi or any other city, going to a therapist is not only, I mean, expensive, time consuming, you are in the traffic like for hours, it's also stigmatizing, all these things, right? But it also create a carbon footprint, right? And so it's interesting. I mean, I haven't really, I have heard these arguments in general for global health in general, but it would be nice to really consider this as an analytical lens and really try to find out how people where a certain rhetoric also shifts to include ideas of sustainability in healthcare, not only like you know, transforming the clinic, for example, and use more sustainable equipments, but also this shift towards digitization in terms of sustainability. That's interesting. Thanks. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
And we definitely, okay, Cami, go ahead.
Thank you for the really interesting presentation. It's really, really interesting. I had a short question. I may have misheard or missed that part. At the beginning, when you were talking about arguments for and against the use of AI in this context, you talked about some arguments against the use, and you said that they are talking about equity and structural violence. I was hoping maybe you can talk a bit more into that, like what type of arguments are there?
Okay, I'm glad that you raised this question, because this is the part that doesn't refer to digitization of mental health care, but these refer in general much more broader to the idea of, you know, this what we call psychologization of suffering, right? So there is suffering, there's inequality, there's structural violence, and so on. And basically the critique is you cannot solve those big structural problems by just sending in psychologists and telling people and helping people to come to terms with their own suffering, and very like bluntly put, ask them to reframe their thoughts while they are like living in absolutely adverse conditions. So this is very bluntly put, this critique, and it doesn't only refer to digitization of mental health care and automation, but more broadly about more broadly to this idea of this globalization of psy, right? The global psy, globalization of psychology and therapy. So this would be this kind of package of critique. This is what I meant. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Any other comments or questions? We still have a few minutes. Start talking.
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Stop this. Or so shall I just stop?
Yes,
this?
if you could, yeah, would be good.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I missed the very beginning of your talk, but you were interviewing the programmers of Wysa. Is that correct? Yeah. So because they work as a business model, and normally they are not happy, people who work in this kind of business, to reveal the guts of their apps. And we also approached Wysa with Marcin, who spoke earlier, and they were not happy to share it for testing purposes, for scientific purposes. But they were willing to talk to you on their experience. I'm wondering, what is the worth of their narratives about it in terms of true value? When they say, they claim certain things about the testing, for example, and especially live monitoring and updating based on feedback. But I wonder if we should trust them. Yeah, that's just it. To what extent they're trustworthy, working as a business model in this particular case.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is a question I I often get. So I get two sets of questions. One set of questions is exactly this, right? So this is all promotional, and in order to find out what they're really doing, do they collect data, and about the business model, and how far do they sell data? How can we trust them if they say they don't, and other things, right? So this is one thing. And the other set of question would be like, yes, I agree. We need to take those designers more seriously. We really need to try to understand them as good ethnographer, right? So our task is not to find out, are these people telling the truth or not? But our task is to find out about the things they say and the things they do in the way as far as we can get. And this is actually what I'm trying to do in terms of. Maybe I can say the difference. I'm not sure about your research, but so I'm not asking questions of efficacy or not. I'm not asking questions of, I'm not an investigative researcher or journalist in the sense of asking, what is really going on while you're telling me this? Is there something else that's going on? I'm much more interested, and I'm also not interested so much in the question whether this works or not. Right. So I'm interested in what are the things that come up when mental health care is digitized. So what are the new as I said, so what does it mean actually for our ideas of care, our ideas of human machine encounters, of agency, and so on, right? So these are the kinds of questions I have in mind. And maybe, yeah, first. And second, as you noticed, and I think I didn't mention that at the beginning of the talk, most of the names that I used are real names, and these are the names of Joe and Chedali and some of the other team members. Why do I use the real name? Because they asked me to do so. They wanted. We had these very long discussions about anonymization of names and the app or not, and they explicitly asked me. So there's a huge. There's a lot to be said about what this means for telling of the story, what this means in terms of what they expect from this kind of work that I'm doing, why they still keep on talking with me. I asked them this question. One of the responses was that it helps them, so the kinds of story that I tell also helps them to maybe include some of this in their own storytelling. And so in a way I can become complicit in it. But these are some of the questions I still need to think it through more. But so far there has not been any single case where they have said, we don't want you, we tell you this, but we don't want you to publish this, right? Or, oh, you have written this, please don't say that. So these cases have not happened so far. But it's interesting, I think. But basically, I think it's just that our questions are different.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm only suspicious a little bit against Wysa because if what they were saying, they were saying is true, they should be interested in this kind of feedback that our testing could give them. Maybe they didn't trust us because we don't know each other personally. That could be one option. But normally, this kind of feedback on how particular cognitive biases are being handled by their language model could be very useful for them to translate into basically business advantage. That's at least the the background of my question. Do you have that stuff published that you were talking about, these qualitative analysis of yours? Is it available somewhere to have a look?
It's still in the review process, including the talk I gave today.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, let's so the other guy who was talking before was your colleague, right?
He's my postdoc, yeah. So I'll write you an email if I may, and will come from a Gmail. I hope you'll get it. But if you could check your spam folder, I'll send it to your university email. And
okay. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
All right. And if you want to manage to communicate, I can always move forward your emails or do the introduction. Anyway, any other questions? or comments? We are so Claudia, can I ask you one question? It's rather from the I've always been curious about non-users in different human technology situations and contexts, and I've been wondering in the context of what you said and the background of designers, that it's a middle class, very kind of international and universal in a way. Have they even thought about non-users?
A lot.
Yeah, who and do they have a group of people who are not going? They know that these people are not going to use the app, not because they don't have access, but for any other reasons. So if you could, say a few words about that.
So, of course they do. Since this is a, I don't know, app with a global reach, this would be different in many countries. But in the very beginning, when I started visiting them, I was mostly interested in India. So the conversations were really about whom they reach in India and whom not. And this is actually one of the things that's really super interesting at the moment, because they are expanding. So they started with English, they started with writing, they started with middle class, but so they have their own layers of the society in India. I forgot the numbers, that percent of people who don't use technology at all, but then there's a huge percentage of people who use technology, and here mostly WhatsApp, really. So most of the people have at least some form of phone, or many even smartphones. It's very, very prevalent in India. But not so much for writing, but more like WhatsApp for certain reasons. And so this is why, so the next step is now that they plan to induce Wysa into WhatsApp in a Hindi version, and this will be audio as well. So here they have a new audience or usership in mind. This will be called, as I said at the beginning, like Wysa, and this is just about to begin. And here it gets really interesting, especially questions of translation, both from English to Hindi, but also in terms of the usership, how we translate certain core concepts. And I didn't say in the beginning, they don't use any kind of psychological expert notions or so. It's all very casual, but maybe it becomes changed as they translate into Hindi. And one step would really follow this Hindi translation and the way it's being used. Yeah, that's part of an answer. Yeah.
Thank you, because then maybe also the concepts or the idea of how they use emotions and what stands behind the emotions that the chatbot uses may also be different in the
Right.
Yeah, that's something. But okay, let's leave it. Okay. So thank you very much for this wonderful and really interesting talk, and thanks to our audience for participating, and I wish you a nice day and a nice evening depending on your context.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and thanks so much for listening and engaging. Thank you.
And we are looking forward to your publication, definitely. Okay, bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.